Governor Greg Abbott spoke exclusively with 25 News. Tonight we recap what he says our state is facing. Plus, law enforcement investigating a quadruple homicide here in Texas. We have the latest on the search for the suspects. And what is the best thing for your child's mental health? We break down a study focused on that question. Also, the weather has been nice to start the work week, but will it continue? Chief Meteorologist Matt Hines has the forecast. Your Krhd News starts right now.
Connecting the Brazos Valley, this is KRHD News.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Hallie Jones. Governor Greg Abbott spoke with 25 News during our 5 p.m. broadcast. Anchor Todd Unger from our sister station KXXV recaps what the governor says are the biggest issues facing the state.
And now joining us live tonight from Austin is Governor Greg Abbott.
In a 25 News exclusive, the governor weighing in on just about anything impacting Texas right now, including the highly contentious election integrity bill under consideration in the special session.
It actually adds hours to voting, not reduces hours to voting. They altered the hours of voting to make it 24 hours, and for the first time ever, they had drive-through voting. The state of Texas has never authorized those practices to be used. Understand this, the United States Constitution gives states, not counties, the authority to establish what laws are.
The bill that state Dems say hurts the right to vote is the big reason a group of them packed up and headed to D.C. last week, bringing that special session to a standstill. The governor tells us he'll call special session after special session until some progress is made, despite the cost. These aren't cheap. Taxpayer money is in play here. How can you be 100% sure these sessions will turn out differently?
So you do make a very important point, and that is taxpayer dollars are being used. Not just election integrity that's on the agenda. It's also reducing property taxes. It's reforming bail reform, including the Damon Allen Act concerning a DPS trooper just outside of Waco who lost his life because somebody was released on bail.
Abbott also defending initial reforms to the state's power grid system, ERCOT, despite some insisting far more needs to be done following that devastating winter storm.
They've increased power generation. Two, they have already provided additional power reserves.
The Texas Supreme Court is extending the state eviction diversion program to October 1st. It gives renters and landlords up to 15 months of rental and utility assistance via federal CARES Act funds. The program was going to end next Tuesday, while the federal eviction moratorium is set to expire on July 31st. And COVID-19 is impacting a Christian ranch right here in Bryan College Station area. Andrew Cook works at the Still Creek Ranch in Bryan. He learned he had COVID in late June after his wife tested positive. At first, Cook was asymptomatic, but a week later, his symptoms got worse. He's been on a ventilator since July 3rd and is showing small signs of recovery.
They said that he was tapping his hand with the beat of the music. And then today I was talking to him about his music and he was nodding his head.
We had employees, we had friends, lots that gathered outside of his hospital room, and we prayed for him there, and we sang.
Still Creek Ranch arranged a meal train to help the Cook family and is asking for more prayers until he reaches a full recovery. Inflation in our country is at its highest point in 13 years. It's driving up prices nearly across the board. Dan Grossman looks at what's causing this and why experts say it's not time to worry yet.
So you've been stuck at home for the better part of the last 18 months. By and large, our economy is reopening, and you think right now would be a great time to revisit that postponed vacation from last year. You look into plane tickets only to realize the price has jumped big time from when you last checked a few months ago. Not only that, the prices of rental cars, hotel rooms, basically everything you might need has gone up as well.
So we're seeing big increases in prices for a few select goods and services.
Gus Fauché is the chief economist at PNC Financial Services Group.
He says prices in travel, hotels, and rental cars have driven the consumer price index up 5.4% over the course of the last 7 months, the sharpest yearly increase in 13 years. If you try to buy a used car right now, prices are roughly 40% higher than they were just a year ago.
But there is good news.
So I do think that a lot of the inflation that we're seeing is overstated.
A deeper dive into into the numbers shows right now our price level, or how much things cost across the board, is about where it was before the pandemic. So that 5.4% is in reference to the prices of goods when everything tanked in the middle of COVID.
It is not looking to me like inflation that's really broad-based and has a lot of momentum. I think it's going to burn itself out relatively soon.
Josh Bevins is the research director at the Economic Policy Institute and says he sees these as temporary spikes as demand for goods and services rise. Take air travel. Many cabins reduced capacity during COVID, so the prices we're seeing now are factored into that decrease. Same with rental cars. Because few people were traveling, companies sold off their fleets, leaving the supply low as demand is now quickly rebounding.
You only have bottlenecks if demand is really strong. Like, it is a good thing that a lot of people want to do that travel that they couldn't do for the past year. It means they are feeling economically secure enough to do it.
Earlier this year, the federal government said it wanted inflation to rise because it had been lagging behind its average for the past few years, and that is happening. Experts say the only time to worry is if it persists for too long, which would then force wages to increase to account for the rise.
But until that happens, which again, experts don't think it will, it might be best to view this as something temporary and natural as our economy continues to recover.
I do think that these are temporary and that I think inflation is going to settle down by the end of this year.
I'm Dan Grossman.
If you thought last year was the most stressful years in recent history, you're right. That's according to Gallup's Negative Experience Index. 4 in 10 adults in more than 100 countries said they experienced worry or stress last year. 3 in 10 experienced physical pain, and 1 in 4 said they felt sad or angry. Experts at Gallup say the pandemic wasn't the only reason for these feelings. Global hunger, lack of freedom, corruption, and income inequality also went up last year. And spending time outside, especially in the woods, is beneficial to children's mental health. That's according to a new study published in Nature Sustainability. Researchers found that city children who spend time out in the woods, meadows, and parks every day have a lower risk for emotional and behavioral problems. They also have better cognitive development. Children who spent time near rivers, lakes, and the sea did not have the same improvements. And one person is in custody this evening in connection with a pair of bank robberies in College Station and a subsequent police chase. Police say both robberies happened at Wells Fargo bank branches in College Station. Officers say they chased the suspect's vehicle on Highway 6 south toward Navasota before arresting the suspect.
The pandemic is still a public health emergency. The head of Health and Human Services renewed that title today officially. Needs to be renewed every 90 days. The declaration allows for the emergency use of vaccines and access to certain government money. Now, if you have trips to go to the UK this summer, give it another thought. According to the U.S. government, the CDC and State Department say that Americans should avoid traveling there. The United Kingdom is seeing a rise in COVID cases.
Woo! Oh, wow. It does change you. Forget to look out the window.
How about this scene today? The historic Blue Origin flight carrying both the youngest and oldest person to ever go to space. It took off this morning from Texas. The trip only took about 11 minutes, and it happened on the anniversary of Apollo 11, further opening the doors to space tourism, but it is also igniting an old debate.
I remember today in 1969 when Neil Armstrong walked on the moon and landed on the moon. But this harkens back to an argument we heard back in those days, which was that why are you spending all this money in space when we have so much to do here on Earth?
John Krhd has spent his life working in the space industry, and he says although there are many people critical of the money that goes into exploration, there's a lot that the general public can get out of it. For example, technology today like cell phones and GPS are still reaping the benefits from the moon program back in the 60s. Now he says the fact that billionaires could start funding studies will only add to what we know about space and make traveling there more of a possibility.
So it advances a capability that we once thought was extremely dangerous, and it brings it closer to reality for more people.
Krhd says it still could be another 30, even 40 years before the general public will be able to afford space flights. But in the meantime, the work that goes into it will open up jobs in several sectors. He says things like engineers, technicians, scientists, accountants, even public relations are jobs that will all be needed. However, today's flight could also pave the way for something less tangible.
this does inspire people. They look at this and they go, well, that's really cool. And they see Wally and they see the kid from the down and they go, wow, that's something I can do. That's an important thing for people to see, that it's achievable for them.
Now, police reform conversations are making their way into the public transit system. Next in our lineup, how some say police presence on buses and trains have been making racial disparities worse in the changes that some agencies are making.
A manhunt is over after a quadruple homicide. Coming up, we'll tell you where this was and have the latest on the investigation. 2 people are in custody after a quadruple homicide in East Texas. Authorities say the suspect shot and killed 4 people at a home in Cherokee County. According to officials, a body was discovered in the driveway of the home. 3 more victims were found behind the residence. Hundreds of firefighters from around the country are in College Station for the next 2 weeks. They're in town for the fire school. Since 1929, the annual fire training school has trained thousands of fire service and emergency personnel. This week, the focus is on industrial workers. Joel White says he is learning how to continue to keep himself, his plant, and his co-workers safe.
Being able to actually simulate real-life events that could happen in the process units back at home, and work on my communication skills and team building with some people I'm not so familiar with. So I think that's a great opportunity as well.
White works for Dow Chemical. The fire school hosts 3-week-long training sessions each July. Now let's get a check of the weather with First Alert Chief Meteorologist Matt Hines.
And we did see a couple of isolated showers and thunderstorms roll across the area earlier tonight, and things are quiet now. We did have a little bit of rain even on our Extraco Eagle Eye camera. It lasted a few minutes and was gone. And things are now looking partly cloudy, 82 degrees, feeling like 86. It's humid. 71 is the dew point. Once you get 70 and above, that's when it's really humid. Winds are out of the north-northeast at 9 miles per hour. So even with the northerly wind, we still can't draw in a lot of dry air. So it is going to stay on the muggy side, and winds will be turning back to the south later on into the work week. And as we check out what's going on, you can see things are starting to calm down here across the area. Main low pressure system spinning here across parts of Mississippi and Louisiana. And there's a little fetch of moisture on the backside. And that's why we saw some isolated showers and thunderstorms. And I think that's going to be the case over the next couple of days. So it's quiet now going on into the morning hours around here with partly to mostly cloudy skies during the afternoon. Here you go, about 30% chance for some scattered showers and thunderstorms around. So maybe a downpour here and there, just like what we saw today. And we'll probably repeat the process again on Thursday as well with some of those isolated showers and thunderstorms around. Rain chances running about 30% over the next 48 hours. Then it starts to go down as we head toward the weekend, as the temperatures will start to heat up on us. So tonight, temperatures falling down into the 70s, 70 in Hearn, 72 Caldwell, and down to Somerville, and as we head toward Bryan College Station, 72. Tomorrow, highs into the upper 80s and low 90s. That's still well below normal for this time of year. Normal is 96, but we are still going to have the humidity, making it feel like 96 degrees outside. And checking out your forecast, we will see those temperatures into the lower 90s the next couple of days. 30% chance of rain. 95 on Friday. 96 is Saturday and Sunday. And then we're going to flirt with 95, 96 as we head through most of next week as well. Heat index values will get at or above 100 degrees once again with all the moisture in the atmosphere. So feeling very much like July as we head into next week.
As the debate over police reform continues, the conversation is now turning to public transit systems. There's a new report from a think tank called Transit Center that argues heavy police presence on buses and trains has been making racial disparities worse.
I think across systems we see that despite the fact that Black and brown people might represent a certain percentage of ridership, they're disproportionately stopped for fare inspections. And this isn't just amongst people that didn't pay the fare. This is just in general, you're more likely to be stopped to have your fare checked if you're a Black or brown person.
The researchers are advocating for less focus on policing low-level offenses like fare evasion. They also want more unarmed personnel trained to respond to mental health crises and homelessness. A few transit agencies have been making changes since the death of George Floyd, and Bay Area Rapid Transit, commonly known as BART in the Bay Area, started bringing in unarmed community-based personnel even before the death of George Floyd, and now it's in the process of hiring crisis intervention specialists.
To make contact with individuals in our system who need resources, whether that's someone, suffering from a mental crisis or in some other sort of crisis, individuals who are unhoused, and also individuals who may be experiencing drug abuse issues.
Now, she says they haven't reduced the number of police officers they have in the Transit Police Department. Instead, they're reevaluating how they're deployed.
This really is a blueprint that other agencies can use moving forward on how we can kind of reform our transit systems to, ensure safety and reduce, disparity, and also encourage people to come back and to ride public transportation again, because it is safe.
Like San Francisco, TriMet in Portland, Oregon has been moving towards unarmed ambassadors. In Philadelphia, the transit agency there has partnered with a nonprofit that is connecting homeless with resources.
This is about finding more holistic solutions for people. This is about making sure the system is safe, and not just through punitive measures, but ways of connecting your riders to the services they need. It's a real opportunity for public transit agencies to rethink policing and to bring more of a customer service focus to it.
Now, he says it is going to take some time to really know how well these new approaches are working. Bay Area Rapid Transit says the feedback from the public's been positive so far, and police are liking the changes as well after initially having some reservations. Now, it may only be July, but businesses are worried already about the holidays. Ahead in our lineup, how they're getting creative to make sure supply will meet demand. More than 60% of vaccinated Americans say they would get a COVID booster shot if it were available to them. This is according to a recent poll from Yahoo News and YouGov. Now, it comes as the more contagious Delta variant is spreading throughout the country. Although a booster shot may be possible in the future, the World Health Organization's chief scientist strongly warns against seeking one out on your own. There are so many unknowns about the safety and efficacy of it, and doctors we spoke with agree.
I think we have to do what we've done all along with these COVID vaccines, which is that we have to base it on the science. And we have to do the studies, we have to do the trials.
There are also situations with other vaccines where more and more doses actually decrease the efficacy. It's not likely to be the case, but we need the information.
Now, that doctor also stresses that basing the need for a booster shot solely off of antibody levels doesn't tell the full picture. There is much more to how our immune systems work. There are also ethical implications to getting a booster shot in the U.S. right now. And the CDC says that 56% of the total population has received at least one dose of the vaccine.
You know, the rest of the world, particularly in developing countries and low-income countries, we still haven't gotten a first dose to healthcare workers and other providers.
I actually think it's better for us. We are safer if we make the rest of the world safe first before we start to make ourselves totally bulletproof.
Both doctors say the same logic applies to the large portion of the population that has not yet been vaccinated in the U.S. The more people who get the vaccine, the safer we will all be from the virus. Now, researchers are starting to look at the long-term impacts of COVID-19 and Miss C on kids. Children's National Hospital and the National Institutes of Allergy and Infectious Diseases are leading this. They'll be enrolling up to 2,000 kids and young adults. They'll be looking at the impacts on kids' physical health and quality of life. More than 3.6 million kids have tested positive for COVID over the last year, and more than 2,800 cases of Miss C have been reported across the country. Retailers and small businesses across the country are already scrambling to get the merchandise they need for Christmas. And as Chris Conti shows us, they're already running into some major problems.
We're in the right direction, I think.
As the only employee and owner of Mate Apparel, Paul Nesbitt stays pretty busy.
Enjoy those margaritas. Thanks.
His store is tucked away in a corner of Provincetown, Massachusetts, a tourist destination that draws tens of thousands of people to its streets every summer.
It lures you in really, really quickly. There's a magic that goes on here.
It is those tourist money that Paul relies on to keep the doors here open.
There's little nuances to all my designs, to the culture of Provincetown.
This summer, though, there's been a problem with business. It's been great. That's right, great.
Thanks, boys.
Shirts and hats are so popular, Paul cannot keep up.
If I can't get mediums, I can't get mediums. And I just have to let the customer know that. And thankfully, at this point in time, the customers understands that.
Like small business owners nationwide, Paul is dealing with a broken supply chain. He will likely run out of merchandise before the summer is over and will have to close.
Who knew a thing like a worldwide virus could cause all these problems, and the longevity of how long it's going to take, for it to get right.
Looking toward the future, the biggest issue facing retailers and small businesses is having enough supply to meet increased holiday demand.
It's affecting everybody and everything.
That is John Gold with the National Retail Federation. He can give some context as to why all of this is happening.
It's really started last year when COVID first hit and factories overseas were forced to shut down. Trying to get everything turned back on to meet that demand has been a challenge.
By now, you've likely heard how broken the supply chain is globally. There's not enough shipping containers to move things, not enough truck drivers to move shipping containers. Those t-shirts Paul Nesbitt sells, he can't get enough of them because the factory that makes his t-shirts has been making masks for the last 16 months.
What's happening in the supply chain and the fact that it's global in nature, and it always will be.
Food, furniture, soda, lumber, washing machines, t-shirts, hats, you name it, all in short supply, and the list goes on.
The challenge for the smaller retailers is that they're relying on other parties that they're buying the products from.
What this all means for retailers like Paul Nesbitt is a lot of creativity. He's already finding new warehouses to order merchandise from for next summer.
I'm confident by next year we'll be back to normal.
In this picturesque corner of the world, a less than picture-perfect situation for businesses. In Provincetown, Massachusetts, I'm Chris Conti.
Chris, thank you. Now, the economy is still recovering from the pandemic, but new numbers show the pandemic's recession only lasted 2 months. The National Bureau of Economic Research says the pandemic sparked recession ended in April 2020, which is when they say the economy started to recover after the initial lockdown. Costco is still keeping special hours for older customers. Now, initially, the company said those hours would end July 26th, but now it's decided to hold them for those 60 and older and those with vulnerable conditions 2 days a week instead of 5. Now, finally in our lineup today, doctors are looking to virtual reality as a possible way to improve health equity, how it could change the training for responding to children in emergencies. As the country strives to improve health equity, the government is exploring new ways to better train medical professionals. Our partners at Newsy went to Boulder, Colorado's National Institute of Standards and Technology to look into virtual reality. Now, these video game-like programs present scenarios where a child is having an emergency, and in the headset, you can hear the child crying. There's a parent as well, and an emergency partner. Meanwhile, the trainee is getting quizzed on how to respond.
As Lindsay moves around the child, he's going to track her with his eyes.
Oh, hi, buddy.
That's a clinical finding that's really important, that shows that they're having a normal cognition.
Emergency room Dr. Brian Gillette co-founded Health Scholars. It's the tech startup behind the virtual reality training, and he's studying how effective VR could be as a standard for training. Currently, most training only happens once a year, and it's on mannequins. Doctors and EMTs rarely get little real-life experience. Children make up only about 20% of VR cases nationally.
When's the last time any of our, literally any of our paramedics or EMTs have run a cardiac arrest on a kid less than 10? We had 2 last year, and I have 65 paramedics.
There are also troubling inconsistencies in pediatric care. One study found that white children were more likely to receive diagnostic imaging during ER visits than Black and Hispanic children.
It can be very difficult to recognize paleness in a light-skinned child. Another serious manifestation of critical illness is sort of a bluish discoloration that you'll get around kind of your lips and sometimes on your fingertips and feet of an infant. That can be difficult to identify in a dark-skinned child.
Virtual reality programs are also a cheaper alternative for preparing for other events like mass casualty training for plane crashers, which the FAA requires every 3 years. Birds are showing up dead in several states among mysterious circumstances.
It's a mystery illness. There are wildlife disease labs around the country working on trying to figure out what the illness is. They have been analyzing corpses of dead birds that have been sent to them.
Tomorrow, where the problem is the worst, and why some scientists who study birds suggest that people everywhere take down their bird feeder.
Jimmy Kimmel's up next. Good Morning Texas is on the air tomorrow at 5 a.m. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night.